Christmas and the holidays are all about hospitality. And we're going to talk a little bit about hospitality today. For many of you, Thanksgiving just happened. You had family, you had friends over, and we've turned a corner now, but we're heading straight towards Christmas this time of year where we might end up doing the same thing. And I don't know if your family and what's going on is the same as with mine, but there's kind of a party every weekend, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, all kinds of things going on out there as we march our way towards the holidays. For some of you, you're naturally wired for hospitality as well. The thought that your house would be full of people and that you're cooking a meal and that there's laughter and there's chaos just fills your cup. You just can't imagine a time without it. For others of you, not so much. The thought of doing all those things and the fact that the house would be full and that you've got to get the house ready and all the things that you've got to do with it ranks up there with petting a skunk. And it breaks you out in cold sweats. So some of us are wired for hospitality and some aren't. Just different. What we'll find out, though, is that the New Testament church was known for their hospitality. The New Testament church was known to be hospitable people. It was interwoven into their being and who they are. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what does it mean to be hospitable people. Now, one of the biggest problems in our modern era with hospitality is we equate it and we compare it with what we see in magazines and what we see on TV. And it can be really difficult, if not flat out depressing, when you try to make something you saw on the internet and it doesn't look anything like it. A little bit like taking a duck to committee and coming out with a platypus, right? And it doesn't work out, and not everybody's smiling and having a great time like you see in those pictures and in the glossy pages of the magazine. And when that happens, you kind of just feel like a failure a little bit. And so we're scared to maybe be hospitable again. But what we're going to find out is that practicing Christian hospitality has absolutely nothing to do with what you see between those glossy pages in the magazine and what you see on TV. It's not about platters of picture-perfect food. It's about practicing servanthood. It's about being a servant and serving others. It's about loving God and realizing that God loves people. And because you love God and God loves people, we too love people. And our hospitality is a natural reflection of that love that we have for God. Now, as we begin to build our case to ask this question, what is biblical hospitality? What does it mean to be generous in our hospitality? Well, a quick look in the dictionary shows us a definition that says this. It says hospitality is the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, and strangers. Now, we have to be careful here because that's a pretty good working definition. But several weeks ago, we talked about something that we do sometimes that we have to be careful of, and that's this. We have to be careful about taking our modern definitions, our modern understandings within our modern cultural norms, and applying them to a first century situation. If we really want to know what a word means, we have to understand, what did the author mean to say when they wrote this? What did this word mean to the original audience for what it was written for? And then we have to take that meaning and bring that into our modern era, but we don't go the other direction with it. And that's one of the things we have to be careful of with hospitality. We need to ask ourselves, when the early church spoke about hospitality, what did they understand it to mean? Well, when we look at that, we see that the Greek word for this is philoxenos, and they're going to show that on there. That's the word right there. Clear, right? You got that word out of that, right? Yeah. That's the original Greek word for what we use as hospitality. What we will find out is it's made of 2 root words that have 2 particular meanings. The first one is philos or phileo. It is one of 4 Greek words for the one word we have of love. The ancient Greeks had 4 words for love, to which we have 1 word. They had storge, which is natural affection. They have eros, which is where we get our word erotic from. If you don't know what that means, ask one of the board members after. There is agape or agape, which is the love of God. But this is the fourth one. It is phileo, which means brotherly love. That is where the name of the city Philadelphia comes from, which is the city of brotherly love, right? So the first part of it, as we understand, is phileo, brotherly love. And it gets us to our first fill-in today, and our understanding of hospitality is loving others like a brother, or loving them like a good friend, a best friend even, to that extent. The second one's a little more complicated. That word is xenos. And that word means stranger, foreigner, or immigrant. Now, it's important to note in the New Testament times in the Greek, it made no distinction between those three terms. It used them interchangeably. When it spoke of xenos, it was speaking of a stranger, it was speaking of an immigrant, or a foreigner. And they were interchangeable. Xenos is where we get our word xenophobia, which is the fear of an immigrant or a foreigner. And so we begin to start seeing a word picture here, because hospitality is generosity then towards strangers. In an early church understanding, it was generosity towards strangers. Now, as we build our understanding of those times, we need to realize that in the first century, particularly in the Middle East, to travel or to go on a journey was a very dangerous thing to do. Water was not readily available. They didn't have lots of hotels, and they didn't have lots of restaurants. There was not a Motel 6 with their light on for you when you went down the street. It could be a perilous journey. There were people who wanted to steal and hurt you along the way. Most of the communities during that time were gathered in oasis or near water. So if you needed that water, you were going to be engaging a community. So it was completely foreign and unheard of in ancient Middle Eastern times, and really in many areas of the Middle East still today, to not provide care, protection, and shelter for people who were traveling. Hospitality was built into the culture. It was expected. To not be hospitable was to be rude in those times, and there were rules and engagements for how you treated people when they were in your home, and how you provided for them, and how you cared for them. There were also rules and agreements for you as a guest in the home. But the thought that you would not show hospitality not only was rude, but it could be life-threatening to someone in that time. And so hospitality was interwoven into that culture. It wasn't so much something they did as it is something they were. In other words, they were hospitable, not because they're trying to gain favor or try to impress anybody. It was just part of their life. And it's an important distinction to understand as we look at this definition, because we begin to realize then that hospitality is showing brotherly love to strangers, to immigrants, and to foreigners. And this, as you probably are already figuring out, has some deep ramifications not only on our faith and how we entertain and how we engage others, but it will also have big effect on our politics as well. Christians in their hospitality are to show brotherly love to the stranger, to the immigrant, to the foreigner. And the important thing to note is that hospitality is a lifestyle that we embrace out of devotion to Jesus and his love for people. It's a lifestyle that we embrace. It's our openness and our availability. It's that deep conviction that because we love God and God loves people, we therefore love people. Because people matter to God, people matter to us. It's a lifestyle we live that shows that. And this lifestyle of radical love that often looks different than what the culture would say it should be or how we should act, it is meant to be and supposed to be a radical expression of the love of Christ outpouring from us in all that we do. When people look at us, they're supposed to say these people are strange. We're supposed to look weird, you weirdos. We're supposed to. When people see the love of us, they're supposed to see that unconditional love of Christ at work with the foreigner, with the stranger, and with the immigrant. That is Christian hospitality. Now, there's some things practically I want to talk a little bit about as we try to practice hospitality in all that we do, whether that's in our neighborhoods, whether that's in our workplaces, and even here at Radiant Church. In our hospitality, the first thing we need to know is that we share our lives with others. We share our lives with others. We do life in community where people are invited in. I love that old Spanish saying. Most of you have heard it, mi casa, su casa, right? My house is your house. What I have is yours. In other words, make yourself at home. And my prayer is that is how you engage hospitality in your life. Mi casa, su casa. In the South, we had a term, it's called refrigerator rights. Refrigerator rights meant we got to a point in our relationship where if you wanted something, get up and get it out of the fridge. I'm busy. No, it meant that you were just comfortable enough to go get something out of the fridge and you don't need to ask. What's mine is yours. In our generosity of hospitality, we share our lives with others. The second thing we need to remember is we welcome people with grace. We welcome all people with grace. Our tables are a place where boundaries and barriers fall apart. They are a place of welcoming, that we welcome those who may not be welcome maybe somewhere else, that we show radical hospitality and generous hospitality to them in all that we do. We must show grace and have the eyes of grace because God has eyes of grace and showed us generous grace. And what generosity in our hospitality and showing grace means is this: you don't have to believe in order to belong. Listen, even here at church, you don't have to believe everything I believe in and what many of us believe in to belong here. You don't have to believe everything we believe in to help out. You don't have to believe everything we believe in to be a part of what's going on. The reality is we're all on a journey and different people are at different places on that journey. And it's our desire not to tell you where to get to, it's our desire to live like Christ and walk alongside you. But the truth is, Jesus can get you there better than I can. Amen. He can. And so we are called in our hospitality to have those eyes of grace while people walk through that journey, asking those questions of life, the same ones many of us are asking. Why am I here? Why do we exist? What happens when we die? All important questions that we're engaging. And our invitation for you is with grace, come be a part and let's learn together in that journey. The third thing that we need to remember about hospitality is we need to protect a person's dignity. In our hospitality, we protect someone's dignity. We protect their greatness. We protect the reality that all people were created in God's image. And because all people were created in God's image, they are all His special, unique, and wonderful creation. We cannot look at somebody as if they are better than someone else. As Christians, we believe the ground is level at the cross. We are to protect someone's dignity in this journey because the reality is we are all broken creatures in need of a Savior. That's right. And no one here has arrived. We're all broken creatures in need of a Savior. Now, there's several things that the New Testament challenges us to with hospitality that are important. I think the first one's obvious, but we need to say it anyways. We're called to practice hospitality. As we look up in Romans 12:13, Paul says, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. The Greek word used there for practice can also be used to mean pursue. And so in many ways, Paul's also saying pursue hospitality in all that you do. Practice hospitality, not just with all people, that's true, but notice he also puts a caveat here. Make sure you take care of those who are part of your community as well, too. Take care of each other. Practice hospitality. The second one might be a little surprising to you, and that's this. Hospitality is a requirement for leadership. It is a requirement for leadership. Notice what Paul says here in 1 Timothy 3:2. He says, now the overseer, in this case the pastors, the overseers, are to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, notice it says here, hospitable, and able to teach. So not only are pastors called to it, but later on Paul says in Titus 1:8, he's now going to challenge the elders. And the elders are anybody that's in a leadership position. So whether you are part of the board, as you saw earlier, if you lead a small group, if you lead worship, there's many areas of leadership in the church. But if you're in a leadership position, Paul would have this to say. He said, rather he, the elder, must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. How you doing with this, leaders? I have to tell you, I didn't walk away feeling really good after I wrote that. I was convicted like crazy. I mean, am I really hospitable as the New Testament defines it? Are you hospitable as the new church and early church was? It's really convicting. Another thing the New Testament church would want us to remember is this: we should offer hospitality without complaining. 1 Peter 4:9 says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Hospitality is supposed to be an outpouring of our joy and love for Christ. It is obedience, but I want to remind us of something as far as Christian obedience is concerned. Christian obedience while grumbling is not obedience, okay? If you're obeying God and you're grumbling, I don't know that you're obeying God. Because obeying God comes from a position of joy and thankfulness for all that He's done. We don't obey God because we have to. We obey God because we are passionately in love with Him. And so we're called in our hospitality to not grumble. Don't complain. Do it with joy. Do it from love. And the last challenge is a real reminder for us. And that's this: do not discriminate. Do not discriminate. Hebrews 13:2, it says, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. How scary is that? You don't know their story. You don't know where they've came from. You don't know where they're going. You don't know how the seed that is planted and you're engaging them will blossom into a harvest later. Throughout the New Testament, Jesus tells stories and challenges us to plant seeds. Do you know none of those stories does He tell us to harvest them? Because the harvest belongs to God. We are called to plant seeds wherever we go in all that we do. And the harvest belongs to the Lord. That conversation you have today, you never know how God can use that seed planted to grow into something you can never imagine. That person you invite into your home, that stranger in your neighborhood that you have coffee or tea with, that person here at church that you've never met but you want to get to know. We never know how that seed planted in faith and joy and love, God can use that to grow something bigger than you could ever imagine. But we're not called to discriminate. We're not called to discriminate, and that includes what someone believes religiously. That includes what someone believes or has as the color of their skin or what they think about a social or a political issue. I'm not asking you to compromise what you believe. What I'm asking you to do, as we talked about earlier, is to protect their dignity, their greatness. That sometimes you have to build a relationship before you explain to someone what you think. Sometimes you have to invest before you invite. Sometimes it just starts with, I love you, and I want to spend some time with you. And I wonder sometimes if we go too quickly towards those other areas. But we are not called to judge a book by its cover. I was reminded of this briefly of many, many years ago. When I first got into ministry, I was bivocational. So I worked a full-time job and I worked full-time in ministry as well too. And the job I worked at is I was a manager of a very high-end Danish audio video company. And it was in this really ritzy shopping center part of town. I mean, my neighbors were like Armani and Gucci and other names I can't pronounce. And, you know, places I don't normally shop. But just a really ritzy, high-end area in the Atlanta area. And I was the manager of that store. And what I would often do is I would get in first thing in the morning before the employees did and open up, just so that I could get some quiet time, get a few things done before everybody got there and things got crazy, and just enjoy the quiet of the morning. And one particular morning, I was doing that, and I opened up the doors, and just a couple minutes later, this man walks in who looked like he had probably been sleeping on the bench out front. He had a hood on over his head. He had a several-day-long beard, and he just looked like a bum, to be honest with you. And he came into the store, and he was just kind of looking around, and he started to ask questions. Hey, who are you guys? What are you all about? And I answered them and told him a little bit about, hey, you know, we're a high-end Danish company and so forth. And we had a rule in the store, and that rule was, it doesn't matter who comes in, we will always show everybody dignity and time. And so we gave it, and at some point he asked me about headphones, and you know, the headphones we sold were anywhere between $300 to $2,000. I mean, they were just expensive ones, and so, but I took him over and talked to him a little bit about the headphones and let him try a few out and listen to some things, and to be honest with you, I didn't expect him to buy anything. There was just no way. And I could tell you that I'm sure at some point I entertained the thought, hey, this dude's wasting my time. What surprised me is after a few minutes of listening and trying out the headphones, he grabbed the ones that were about middle of the way in the pack, and he said, I'll take a pair of these. I said, oh, okay. We went over to the computer to begin to write the sale up and so forth. And I asked him, hey, how would you like to pay for this? And he pulls out his wallet, and out of his wallet, he pulls out an American Express Black Card. Now, if you don't know what American Express Black Card is, there's a reason for that. You can't afford one. American Express Black Card is a no limits card. Very few people get them. So right away I began to think, uh-oh, who in the world is sitting in front of me? Who am I talking to at this point? And I looked down at the card, and the name on it said Reginald, and I'm not going to tell you the last name. And it was one of those times, you ever heard a name, and you're like, I can't place it, but bells are going off in your head. I know this name. I've heard this name. Somewhere along the way, I've heard this name, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I rang the sale up, put it in a bag, and he was about halfway out of the store, and it hit me. I said, I owned an album when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and it was called Reggie Strikes Back. And then I remembered it was named after the artist's real first name, which is Reginald. And it hit me who this was sitting in the store. I'm not going to tell you, by the way. What was funny is he got to the door, and for whatever reason, he figured out I figured it out too, because he turned around and he went, shh. I tell you that story to tell you this. He went on to spend over $100,000 with me later on. He was a very good customer. But what if I had judged that book by the cover? What if I had assumed this bum is worthless? There's no way he can spend money here. He's wasting my time. We need to be careful about judging a book by its cover, because things are not always as they seem. I know later some of you are going to look up trying to figure out who the person was. Gets us to our so what moment, which is a little longer this week, but I want to get down to just some practical things we can do to show hospitality if we could. These are practical not just in the sense of your workplace or your home, but really even truly here at Radiant Church. These are some things I've wanted to talk about for a while. It's just good advice for all of us. As I was writing them and reading and so forth this week, they were just incredibly good reminders of how we have the opportunity even here to just show radical hospitality. But we need to remember this. As we said at the beginning, practicing Christian hospitality isn't about glamorous table settings or platters of food. Keep in mind, it's about serving others. It's about serving others. In particular, as we talked about, it's about showing brotherly love to the stranger, to the immigrant, and to the foreigner. We have the opportunity to talk to strangers in our neighborhoods. We have the opportunity to talk to strangers at work. We even have the opportunity here. There's many different ways. We talked a little bit earlier, on your seat is a Christmas card that is an opportunity for you to start a conversation with somebody, invite them to be a part of our Christmas Eve services. That's one great practical tool that is available to you. Each week here at Radiant, we have the opportunity to meet strangers. Hardly a week goes by, I can't remember a week going by, where there was not a guest here at one or both services. Maybe you're a guest with us today. We're so glad. We're going to tell you all our dirty secrets about being hospitable today. Welcome. What are some practical ways to help a guest, to help a stranger feel welcomed and hospitable here? Here's a few that I wrote down. The first one is this, and I didn't put them in your notes, so maybe I'll include them in something this week as we send them out. But if you want to take notes, you can. The first one is this. Give the guest the best parking spots. If you're physically able. I realize not all of you are physically able to do that. Give your guests the best parking spots. What's interesting about that is it's a posture that says, I'm putting the guest first before I even enter the building. As a staff, we park in the back, mainly to hide from you so you don't know we're here. Just kidding. No, we park back there because no one else does. So it just frees up 3-4 spots back there. It's just a simple thing to do. If you're physically able, and I realize not everybody is, but maybe leave some of those front spots available for our guests so that they have an easy way into the building. The second thing is pretty simple. A genuine smile and hello can go a long way. Notice I put there, we're not trying to impress anybody. The goal is for people to feel loved, not impressed. Our desire is for you to be a part of our family, be a part of what's going on, be a part of this movement where Jesus Christ is taking broken lives and forgiving sins and helping put people on a path of wholeness. But the truth is, people can sense and smell and know fakeness quickly. I can. So be real. The third one, check your breath. When you came in, you also noticed there's a breath mint on your seat. You've ever had a conversation with somebody that had really bad coffee breath, you know how difficult that conversation can be. And it always seems like the person who wants to talk right in your face. You know what I mean? You're just like, you know. So there's breath mints on your seat. Use them. We're going to start keeping them in the back as well, too. Keep your breath fresh. It's a simple thing. The next one, make it a point to go introduce yourself. Another simple one, but how often don't we do that? Go introduce yourself. I have to be honest with you, as it says there, the greatest fear of mine as a pastor is that somebody could attend Radiant Church and nobody would talk to them, nobody would greet them, no one would say a word to them. That to me would be a nightmare, and I hope that would be a nightmare to you too. The thought that somebody could come here and not feel loved and not feel connected with, to me, is a failure on our part. If you're in a conversation with someone, break it off for a minute if you don't recognize someone or they don't look like maybe they're lost or confused, don't know where they're going, unless it's a really important conversation. But if this is someone you've known for years, just say, hey, hold on a second, and go up and introduce yourself. Tell them, my name is blank. What's yours? It's good to see you. Welcome. The next one is ask good questions. Some good ones. You know, where do you live? What do you do for a living? Have you visited other churches? Do you have a family? Do you have any questions? Point is, focus on them and listen. Make them the focus of the questions and be genuine in your ask. Some quick don't do's, please. These may surprise you. Don't ask, are you new? I'll never forget the person who asked me that after 2 years of attending the church. Yeah, are you new? I guess I am. Or is this your first time? Yeah, don't assume. Here's a big one. If someone's been gone a while, please don't say, where have you been? Nothing feels more judgmental than that. Where you been? You might as well add on the end of it, you big loser, right? You're not going to feel good about that. Don't ask them, where have you been? Or, I haven't seen you in a while. Just tell them you're glad to see them. And for heaven's sakes, please avoid politics and other issues, social issues. Be positive. Don't complain. We talked about don't assume. And don't argue and debate. That's not the time for it. Just tell them you're glad they're here. Help answer their questions they may have. Which gets us to the last one. If they are new, show them around. Show them the bathrooms, kids ministry, coffee. Here's a big one. Maybe you've done this, maybe you haven't. Invite them to sit with you if they desire. Have you ever done that? Sometimes just walking into a new place, you ever walked into a strange place with a bunch of people you don't know? We forget over time as we make friendships, that's a pretty daunting experience. Make it as easy as possible, and something as simple as, hey, would you like to sit with me? Now, don't force yourself on them and don't scare them. Yeah, you will sit with me. In the front row. Oh, use some common sense. But anything you can do to help someone feel comfortable is showing hospitality, and it's true here, it's true in your homes, it's true anywhere else. Don't smother them. The last quick one that I want is I'm going to invite my good friend, Mr. Weston, forward if I could. The last one's to tell you this: a good handshake goes a long way. But I think sometimes we get a little confused about what a good handshake is. So I want to demonstrate it. A good handshake is one, good with eye contact, all right? It's a firm grip, it's a single. Some failures, don't be the shaker, all right? Yeah. Don't be the awkwardly too long handshake. Yeah. Yeah. Avoid the dead fish. The single finger shake. That's just weird. Don't do the overreach. Or any other. Am I missing any?
No.
No, okay. What'd you think, Weston, for coming up? Yeah. Avoid the vice grip. If I need to go to the doctor after we're done, you failed, all right? A good handshake goes a long way as well, too.